Hello, and welcome to the Nickels and Dimes Finding Financial Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, and I look forward to bringing you amazing content each week that will provide you with a financial education. It will support you in your financial journey, and most of all, help you to find financial freedom. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Nickels and Dimes Finding Financial Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, and today I'm joined by Tim Parnell. We're going to be discussing a whole bunch of things today around real estate, the market, Tim's background, and everything he's done. So let me just share a little bit of information about who Tim is, what he does, and then we'll jump into the meat of it. So Tim Parnell is a serial entrepreneur and businessman who has owned and operated businesses in the housing and financial industry for almost 2 decades. He's an avid learner and researcher and shares and teaches his knowledge to fellow Americans daily. He cut his teeth in the real estate investing world back in the 08-09 market crash and has had a pulse on the economy and capitalized on various trends since. He's been an expert guest on Real Estate America News as an economist and has been educating people on the market and the condition it's currently in for years. Tim, with his wife, Allison, began their journey as financial professionals in 2020. They have a mission to save as many financial lives as possible. They've taken major action on Tim's belief and research that the market is due for a powerful shift. They've relocated their own holdings into physical precious metals, crypto, and the financial assets that they educate so many people on. Life insurance-backed assets. One of the more recent actions he's taken is to liquidate all his real estate holdings, including his own home, and hit the road with his family. They live full-time in a fifth wheel RV, traveling America and homeschooling their 2 young children, while their dog Charlie tags along. While doing this, Tim has built a strong business with Vantage Financial Alliance and has helped many people position themselves to adapt, survive, and thrive in the upcoming market shift. Tim, I appreciate you being here today, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
As am I. I'm grateful to be here and happy to discuss some of the details about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to throw out a little icebreaker question for you to begin with. I didn't give you any heads up on this, so I'm curious
No,
about
you
what the
didn't.
answers.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Maybe I should have given you some warning. All right, so here's my icebreaker question. If you could be any superhero, who would you be and why?
Ah, that's a good one. I'm not. I don't keep up with superheroes and or comics, but I have a friend that's very passionate about it, and he always told me that the one that I reminded him of was Wolverine. And I don't know exactly what his justification was, but I think it had something to do with like my not really giving a crap attitude towards what others think and kind of doing my own thing, thick skin, stuff like that. The ability to kind of recoup and jump back into the fight kind of thing. So, and I had hair once, so there was that. And and maybe I was maybe built closer to that. Not anymore, and that's okay. But that was a while ago. So I'm gonna say Wolverine.
All right. You know what? Based on your recap of what he told you, I think I would agree with that. Definitely, you're somebody who can pivot for sure, without a doubt, and you're also somebody that when you're convicted about something, it's because you've done your research and you're going to stand your ground on that, but not in a way of being disrespectful to anybody else in their opinion, but in a way of educating and having open conversations, right?
That's
So yeah, I think that's a great fit for you.
yeah.
So let's start with the first. I'm going to take you, kind of to the real estate world to begin with. Um, One of the things I hear people say all the time in networking, I meet a lot of real estate agents, mortgage brokers, right, in the world that we live in. And so one of the things they say is that the question they hear all the time is now a good time to buy or sell? And why or why not?
And the question in there for me is do I think it's a good time to buy or sell?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I think the answer to the question truly does depend on where you're at. what your goals are financially. Um, I always smile when I think about real estate professionals, as I was one. I put my license on hold since to focus on the financial business. But but yeah, it seems to be the old adage. It's always a great time to buy or sell. Well, of course, if you're in the business of helping people buy or sell, you kind of want that message out there. Now, no disrespect to the professionals out there, but the truth be told is that there are more appropriate times to buy and or sell depending on what's going on in the market. In my opinion, if you're going to be buying now and you're not plan on holding your house for at least 10 years or more, it's possible you're going to be upside down. Full stop. Okay. I know people that already are. And
Yeah.
that's even in the Texas market, which, was one of those migrations. One of the phrases I coined was called migration inflation, which was migrating from, we'll just say blue states to red states, because that's exactly what it was. If you put it on a map, people are
Right.
leaving California for Texas and people are leaving, New York for Florida and whatever. So those states where people were coming into in droves, the prices of real estate were going through the roof. And as a professional, I'm looking at it going, holy crap, this cannot sustain. Well, not only cannot sustain just because there's just a point where people just stop paying that, but also you've got market conditions completely against the continued hyperinflation of real estate. All right. And so with those two factors, I would say if you're in the market to buy, truly think through it. Maybe consider, I'll be honest, renting. I know there's professionals out there going, shut up, Tim. Look, I'm just here to be real. Okay. Consider renting and doing something with the money that would otherwise be put into a deposit and or equity until the time is better to buy, maybe closer to a lull in the market, something like that. As far as selling, um, I mean, the reason we sold our homes was because we knew we were selling close to the peak of the market. We knew, and I'm 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 trying to play the smart money, which is smart money sells high, buys low. So I wanted to get out while it was up. I knew it was up. And so that included our own personal home. There was nothing wrong with our home. We loved our neighbors. We loved our friends. We loved the community we're in. Our family is all back there. But I was looking at my house going, you know what? I'm not married to this thing. I can let it go. And I mean, of course, we chose a completely different life. I mean, we're full time RVing, and that's not for everybody, but we're loving it. But that's just because we have the freedom to do so. And so while everybody is stressed and, nibbling their nails, we're out there having a blast and trying to help as many people as possible understand what's coming, how to pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I mean, I definitely did want your opinion on it because one, I mean, you've been in that world, that was your livelihood for a while. You're also, as I mentioned already, a researcher when it comes to things. And so, yeah, I mean, everybody that listens to this is going to have their opinion. They're going to have their basis for that opinion, and that's perfectly good. But for the general listener, I wanted to get your input on that. And I'll say, like, you guys did have a great house. I had the pleasure of going over there a few times. Is a great gathering house because you had a lot of space, and we had a lot of fun there. The crazy thing is that I don't know that I've shared with very many people is about 3 years ago, right when I mean, the market was insane. I lived in my house by myself with my two dogs. And there was a part of me that thought, this 2,600 square feet is pretty big for just me. I never go upstairs. And so there was a part of me that thought, do I take my equity because I've been blessed. I got into my house at the right time. And so, my value it's close to doubled at this point. So I'm like, do I take that and buy a little RV and just like I could go back and forth to see my family? I could be here, whatever. The only thing that held me back was that it was just me. Right. And so road tripping like that, dealing with all the nuances. That was the one thing that held me back um, in that logical decision. And now with my parents living with me, I know there was another thing that held me back because
Sure.
now I'm able to have them here with me. But I love the life that you guys have, and we'll dig a little bit more into that as we go on, and talk a little bit about where you're at and what you're focusing on there because um, I think that ties into some of this conversation too. So, and then, yeah, I
Absolutely.
think, the idea of, is it a good time to buy? Does it make sense to wait? Is it a good time to sell? Um, I think you make a good point, right? From an investor's standpoint, you buy low, sell high. That way you come out. ahead in every transaction. You may not win in every transaction to the same level. But when you look at it that way, it does put you ahead. And so from the work we do and the mindset that we have, I think that makes perfect sense as a
Sure,
way.
and I will say this: there are levels of investing when it comes to real estate. I mean, there are people who their wealth is such that they don't have to sell their homes in order to capitalize on a downturn. My acquisition of real estate was in a place where I knew that I could capitalize by the liquidation and the buying back in. Others would say, no, you should hold for the tax write-offs and all these other things. For our own unique situation, it just made sense for us. But again, that's where it really depends. And I would encourage anybody who's truly thinking about it, especially if you hold multiple properties and you're going, do I really want to sell right now? I mean, you think about the years 2020, where people who were holding real estate as investment properties, the government basically said that renters didn't have to pay rent, but mortgage holders still had to pay their mortgage.
Right.
Many, right? And not everybody. I mean, some people figured out how to beat the system a little bit, and but not everybody figured that out. That you could also put your mortgage on pause if you are a mortgage holder of multiple properties, and so you could. Everybody was kind of on pause, but some did not realize that. They got hurt. They got crushed by renters not having to rent, but they kept paying their mortgage, right? So it just there's a lot of variables ahead of us that we can't really put a finger on, but we all have a gut feeling that things aren't right and they're going the wrong direction and people just aren't sure what to do. And that's why I kind of come from the angle I come from, which is, just speak the truth as I understand it, let the chips fall where they may, and I'm going to help as many people as I can along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make another good point there in that none of us has a crystal ball, right? When it comes to uh the financial work that we do and working with people and being able to say this is the one, this is the place to put your money and it's going to be everything. Um all of those decisions in any realm of the financial world are based on patterns we have from history, right? And applying those out and doing our best to say, here are the signals that show you're in a similar time to this. And so you look at it this way or that way, but none of us has a crystal ball. So, I mean,
Yep,
unfortunately, if we had a crystal ball, none of us would need each other, right?
that's exactly
Let's
right.
be honest. So, okay. So on that note, I want to kind of stay in that world just a little bit. Is one of the things that I guess over the last few years, for me, I'll speak from my perspective, I've heard more about is reverse mortgages. And I know we recently had a meeting and a training with yourself and another professional kind of talk about the idea of reverse mortgages. And I was one of those people that thought, oh no, never, right? But I never did the research on it. I didn't really have a reason to. But with your background, that's something you're more familiar with and how those actually work and the people that they can truly benefit. And so I wanted to dedicate a few minutes of our conversation towards that from an educational purpose, because that meeting we had opened my eyes to the tool that can actually be in the right scenario. They're definitely not for everybody, but in the right scenario, it's definitely a valuable tool to have in your pocket. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
let you kind of jump in wherever you want to start with that.
Yeah, and I will start by saying that no, I am not a loan officer licensed or anything like that. I'm speaking from my general knowledge and the conversations I've had with people that have benefited from these things. And so the biggest misconception with reverse mortgages is that if let's say someone you love, a grandparent or a parent, is taking advantage of one, that they're being taken advantage of, and that whenever they no longer are able to make that mortgage payment, the bank claims and owns the home, and they claim all the equity and everything in it, and that is not true. Okay, so that is where the first misconception comes from with reverse mortgages. Now, being in the financial sector, why are reverse mortgages important to talk about? Because a lot of times, and Natalie, you and I will sit down with people and we find out that their number one problem is cash flow on the monthly, right? Like
Yep.
they are unable to make ends meet because they are getting absolutely freaking crushed by hyperinflation right now.
Yep.
Okay. And so we are problem solvers. And as problem solvers, even if I don't get paid to have that conversation, but I'm still helping my customer client solve a problem financially, that's what I'm there to do. And it turns out that reverse mortgages can help ease the pain for some demographics, as far as, people on tight budgets, but they've got a lot of equity in their home, or they're elderly, but they're getting their butts kicked by either inflation of goods and services and gas and whatever. And so they're on these fixed incomes, and they're setting on a massive amount of equity. Now, the American dream was once to pay for your home and have it paid for, paid off.
Right.
But I'll be honest, like, if you really look at the numbers, I'm not sure that actually makes the most sense. In
Mhm.
fact, I can tell you right now, most investors don't really want to have their mortgages paid off. They want to continue having equity, some equity in their home, enough to offset and make a little stream of income per month. But they're leveraging the debt portions on their home, taking that out to go acquire more property and increase their cash flow. But we, as single homeowners, just one property, are like, well, I got to pay it off, pay it off, pay it off. And so I'm gonna add a little bit more spice to this question as far as answering it goes,
Yeah,
okay? And we'll
absolutely.
see if your listeners can keep up with what I'm saying. But here's the deal. If you had a mortgage, which right now the interest rates are higher. I mean, at the time of this recording, we're looking at 8% plus minus, depending on your credit score.
Right.
Um, and likely those will go higher. Um, but let's say 4 years ago, you could have gotten a 4% or a 5%. Okay. That's a simple interest rate. If you got $100,000 loan, which we know didn't really exist, but $100,000 loan at 5%, okay, you're looking at $5,000 simple interest on top of the 100. Okay. But if I pay off my house, and my house is worth $100,000 and I pay it off, I have $100,000 worth of equity in a $100,000 home. I only have $100,000 worth of assets.
Right.
But if I take that $100,000 equity, or even 80 out of it, or 60 out of it, and I go acquire another asset, I have my home that's worth $100,000 as an asset, and then I have that equity over here somewhere else working for me, and potentially in a compound earning account, right? And
Yeah.
that's the stuff where we teach. So now the question is, okay, great. So you're telling me I can put my equity to work. Well, how do I get access to it? And there's where the reverse mortgage comes in. Now, a reverse mortgage could be a good pain reliever for somebody who's tight on their monthly budget,
Hmm.
and you're dealing with, elderly folks or retired folks, and they've done a great job paying off the house. And I sat down with a gal not too long ago who had a $500,000 home paid for, but she was, I mean, scraping the bottom of the barrel financially to get her fixed income to carry her through this economy right now.
Right.
And so I'm looking right there. I mean, just screaming at me is $500,000 worth of equity, and she's still having to pay taxes on the house. And I said, well, what about a reverse mortgage? And now that's not, I'm not the expert. So if she's curious about it, I need to put her in touch with one, which I had. And the information she got was, look, it is possible that we can tap into the equity of the home, because it's based on the equity of the home, or the amount owed versus the amount it's worth, and the age of the person. So there's, a risk that the bank takes on by basically buying out a portion of that equity. So what she would get in return was either a lump sum payment, and the details of that again are with the lender, not through me,
Right.
but a lump sum payment at closing. In her case, it could have been about $100,000 at the first one, and then at the second closing on year two would have been about $80,000. And she would have had those two chunks of money to do what she wanted to do with: live on, put aside, invest, whatever. It's her money. Okay. But she would take it at even an 8% or 7% or whatever the interest rate would be, but it's simple interest. But if she took the same money and put it into a 7 or 8% compound interest account, she's kicking butt with the same money over here in the compound account that she is in the simple,
Right.
because she's got her butt kicked by leaving her equity in the house. And so what it does is it allows, and the other one was, she could have taken a lifetime income for as long as she lived in the home, and it would have paid for her mortgage, paid for the taxes on the property, and given her an income back of like $1,000 a month. What a blessing that would be.
Right.
So then, if the listeners out there are listening the way that you and I once did, which was, yeah, but if that's my mother or my father or my grandmother, like, aren't they going to be taken advantage of in the end? Or how does that affect me and the inheritance of that property? That was supposed to be my I mean, depending on where your head's at, that could be what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And so my retort to that would be this: the bank says the first right of refusal to the family is that they get the first right to buy the property from the bank for only the amount that is owed. Now, if the home has equity, let's say it's got another 100, $200,000 worth of equity left in it because she only took 250, 300,000 equity out of the home, then the family has first right of refusal. They get a year, effectively, this is my understanding, to put that property in the market if they choose to, and then sell it and liquidate it and take the equity and go. Okay. Now, that's not the same thing as moving into a rent free house that all you got to do is pay the taxes. I understand that. But if we're looking out for our elders, and this is a means of doing so, and the rest of the family can sustain without needing that property down the road and it makes sense, it's a viable option. You can even do so. I think I answered that question.
You
Okay.
did.
You
You
can
did.
turn it into a stream of income. You can take it out in chunks. You can do whatever you want to do with the chunks of money. Okay, because it's yours. All right. And so there are people, like, even if you had multiple properties and you've got some that are paid off, you could take the equity from that and go and leverage it into other assets. Or if you want to just outright liquidate the home, you could do that before the market downturns, and then what, right? But most elderly folk want to stay in their house, right? That's their home, and they don't want to uproot. And this just gives them a way to do that with even a little bit of cash flow, depending on how they qualify.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you going into that. And I'm glad you gave that example of you've got one asset worth $100,000 versus two assets that are building for you long term, because that's when you said that, in our previous call with some of our team members, that's when my ears perked up and I thought, okay, wait a minute. And so then as I listened to those different components, similar to what you just laid out here, it made more sense in situations, because you and I see all the time people whose loved ones are in retirement, they're struggling to make ends meet. Sometimes they're still working in retirement because Social Security is not enough. And
Mhm.
I'm going to be honest and just come right out and say, in the last 20 or 30 years, as as I grew up, my parents were one of the few that stayed in the home we grew up in, right? Because when interest rates came, so all those people who bought their homes in the 70s and 80s, when interest rates were super high, their kids grew up, they moved out, they had a ton of equity in those homes. So what they do, they sold them and went and bought that bigger, nicer, updated house in their 50s on a 30-year mortgage, right? Now, I'm not saying my parents did it exactly right by paying off their house. Luckily for them, they had, my dad's military retirement, a small pension from a job he had, my mom's retirement from her job. And so those with Social Security, like my parents can't qualify for stuff. I mean, my mom has Medicare, but beyond that, they don't step in with any of the extras because my parents make too much money. But when you think about those people who went and bought those other houses, now they're in their 70s, they have a mortgage, they're paying all these things, they may still have a car payment if they're still driving. Or maybe they're starting to run into health things. And so they have additional expenses. Who knows what's going on? But they may be in a situation where that's the answer, like you were saying about the lady that you met with the other day. I actually
So,
met with a
oh, go
lady.
ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I actually met with a lady last week that, when I got all of her information, the first thing I did is look at the equity she had in her house, because I was praying she was in a situation where a reverse mortgage can help her, and unfortunately, she's not.
Hmm.
And that's the first time literally in 5 years of my career I've run into that. And so I don't know what we're gonna do, but you and I, Tim, like, we dig in our heels and we work with people, even if we have to improve situations in small steps. And so that's where we're gonna start. But that I got enough education that I sat with somebody in that situation. I'm like, okay, do we have this option? And so like you said, when that's there, it may make sense. And what's the alternative? Right? You don't want your parents to do that. So you tell them, don't look at that. And they don't. So they continue to struggle. And then what? They're leaning on their kids, which is something most of them don't want to do, to get the help and the supplement and the care and whatever that they need, because they're not in a position where they can pay for that themselves. So
I can tell you exactly how it ends because the 2008, 2009 market collapse was, dare I say, contrived, because there's no reason the bank should have called those notes due when they were being covered. Okay. Now, you want to call them notes due, call the ones that are short, but they called everyone
Hmm.
that was multiple property owners. I mean, everyone got hit. And to me, it was almost like a land grab situation, but through real estate. And that's just my opinion, people. Okay. But that being said, it just didn't make sense. But the reality was you had people who had equity in their homes who stopped paying their mortgage for some reason or another. I mean, maybe because they lost a job, maybe because financially they got hit as well because of this forced collapse thing. And they walked away from equity, and they could have short sold or something. And they just don't know that they've got options besides, foreclosure. But
Yeah.
that's where they go. Get foreclosed on with equity in the home that they could have let someone else either take over, or they could have made a better financial decision with a bank. They just don't know their options. And so that's why it's important for us to help people understand what their options are, even if we're not the professionals that are helping them, but we have to turn it over to another professional who can. And then the other thing I will tell you with this, based on, what you were saying, was the reason why Americans would upgrade their mortgage to another home, they pay off a home, then upgrade to another home and a bigger and more expensive home and so on, is because that is the way we're taught. That's the way we're ingrained, is your status is your home and or appearance, right?
Yep.
And so in order to elevate that status, we have to elevate the appearance of the home. And so it's not necessarily the investments and the holdings, because people can't see that. And so it's that whole quote unquote keeping up with the Joneses. And whether we're telling ourselves the truth or not, that's why most people do it. And they could have, instead of taking, if they savvy enough, those people, and there's so many out there, especially the older generation, right? They have that equity and they cash it in to go buy another house to dump all of that equity in there. And I say, well, if they could afford a portion of their mortgage and take some of that equity and put it to work, they could now have two assets that have the potential to double in value every 10 to 15 years instead of just one that they can't even touch the equity on. Where
Yeah.
at least if you have another asset working for you from the original equity, now you can touch it depending on the agreements of those contracts and whatever.
Yeah.
So we're just reshaping the paradigm now. That's what we do, and for us to do it, it's such a custom tailored conversation that we have to sit down with people. We have to have that conversation about what's unique to them, so that we can figure out what we can do to help them.
Yeah. And I think a couple things there. Like I tell people all the time, look, we the world today is constantly pushing every opportunity to spend.
Mhm.
Um including when that spending puts you in debt, right? It does not say, "Hey, here's a commercial on how you can save in a product that can create financial freedom for your family forever." I've never seen that commercial. I don't know about you, but I've never seen that commercial. And so, it is that mentality. I mean, that's a big example of it, upgrading the house, but even always paying off a car, trading it right in and getting another car payment, right? There's millions of examples. The new fancy Apple this, that, or the other. I'm an Apple lover. And I'll tell you, for a few years, it was every time the phone upgrade came, I was paying that extra to upgrade my phone. Now I'll hang on to my phone until I have to trade it in. Part of that is probably a little bit of maturity, a little bit of learning what I know now, being in the industry that we're in. But that's the thing, is we're pushed to focus on spending and having instead of saving and having. It's the have of that tangible thing right now versus the have of complete financial freedom in the future. And that's
Mhm.
where the education that we try to provide, and that path we walk with people. And the other point you made that was super important to me is on that journey, it's personal and different for every single person. And so when it comes to people who have questions in a reverse mortgage, I'll speak to that specifically since we just talked about it. But that's one of the reasons that we're always looking to sit down with all of the decision makers. If we're talking to a married couple, we want to talk to both people. One, because we want them to get the right information, both get the right information the first time from us instead of trying to translate it for each other. But also, I would say, if I sat with, um, my parents, if they weren't my parents, let's just say they were clients that came to the table, and I knew they're looking at all these different options and they had children who played a part in helping, because a lot of that happens when we have retired. We may not be managing their assets, but we're having those conversations and maybe giving advice or recommendations and support in decisions they're making in retirement. Um, that would be where I would challenge people, go to the table with your parents, to sit down with the professional, and again, hear it firsthand from the person who is the expert. Because like I said, I've had my financial services business for 5 years. I'm good at what I did, but 2 or 3 weeks ago when we had this call, I was still like, uh, until I sat and just was willing to hear it out. And then you said that one thing, and I'm like, holy crap, I get it. Right. And so that's what it is a lot of the times. Our clients, we experience that with them. All of a sudden they're like, holy crap, that makes total sense. I've never heard that before.
And
So
and you're absolutely right that especially anything that has to do with the elders in our families, and that their children need to be involved. Their adult children need to be involved, because the decisions they make are going to affect the next generation and even on. And so they need to be a part of it, but not because the elder in the family said, "Hey, I was thinking about doing this thing," and they're trying to convey all the information, because I promise you, they'll never get it. They'll never get it right, fully understand it. They'll never be able to convey it. So if those adult children are not there with their parent or grandparent or whoever to help them make decisions that are going to affect everyone, but talking to the professional, getting that information directly from the source, they're never going to be able to make a sound decision. And so you're absolutely right that the most important thing to us as professionals is that when we are helping people make choices and decisions by giving information education, everyone that it's going to affect should also be there to listen 100%.
yeah. And I think that, that's one of the other things that I know you focus on this because I know some of the strategic partners that you have. Um, and and I do this as well. I mean, I think a lot of financial professionals, especially a lot of our business partners do this, is we take the time to develop strategic relationships with the experts in other segments of finance that do not fall under our umbrella. Because at the end of the day, and so if you're listening, I hope you hear this part. At the end of the day, if I send a client to work with Tim, my real estate agent, and I don't know Tim well enough to know that he's going to take as good a care of my clients as I am, and they have a bad experience, like that impacts everything in their financial portfolio they're working on, right? Because now that that trust and that rapport I've built with them comes into question to some degree too. And so, I mean, I would always say, it's really easy to see a phone number or an ad on social media, on TV or whatever, and pick up the phone and ask questions about something. But working through somebody who has the expertise, whether it's working with a financial professional like Tim and myself, and then getting recommendations to other experts in different financial avenues, or working with that real estate person or the mortgage person, but getting connected to um, financial professionals like us. However, that works, to have those connections based on people who are building relationships to ensure that you're going to get the best information, always, always saves time, because
Yes, it is.
you move right in the direction you need to go instead of maybe tripping a couple times on your way there or ending up in a situation that you've got to go through some years of time to get out of. So,
Yep.
okay, so you touched really quick in what you were saying. You mentioned 2008, and I know 2008, 2009, like that's when you were coming into real estate. Um, so I want to ask you, and I don't know, to be honest with you, the exact way to ask this question. But like we saw everything that happened in 2008, 2009, and really that started about a decade of really rocky years for me in corporate America. I moved to Texas with the company I thought I was going to work with forever in 2005. Yeah, 2000, 2004, 2005, right? I thought I was going to be with JC Penney forever. It was a great company. And then 2008 hit. And so it wasn't just the housing market, it was hitting companies, it was hitting all people that had money invested all over, including corporations. And so I got laid off at the end of 2008. And so I rode the wave in my career of the impact of that for probably really 5 to 7 years, pretty significantly. Um, but talk a little bit about like what was it that happened then? And I hear people asking, like, do we have to be worried about that again now? Like, if you're able to touch on what's the same and what's different, and maybe what people should be watching for.
Okay. And I'm happy to do that. And I'll run a little caveat to what I'm about to say to the details, the true details I'll spare on this podcast so that you don't get any flags. How's that?
There you go.
Uh,
Listen, if
and
I have
then,
anybody reach out,
yeah,
I'll
shoot
connect.
them over. We can have all kinds of conversations about it. But yes, and again, my disclaimer is this is my opinion based on my research, the things that I convict myself in as far as like where I stand, and so those who have seen the movie The Big Short have seen one side of the coin,
Mhm.
and so the truth, and I this is my phrase, the truth is like a coin. How many sides of a coin are there? And most people would say what?
2.
But the truth is, there's that one side that's in the middle that everyone forgets about. And that's where I think most of the truth lies for a lot of the things that we even feel and or think or witness
Yeah.
about everything.
Yeah.
And if we apply that a coin has three sides, the two obvious ones, and then that one in the middle that's probably a blend of both,
Right.
that's what I think happened in 2008, 2009. Sure, it might have been unexpected and just came out of nowhere. That's what most Americans believe, but the warning in writing was all over the wall before it came.
Yeah.
And those who were in the know and had the knowledge. Now, I wasn't. I'll be honest. I was not there. I did not know the writing on the wall before the moment happened. I was too young to even care. Okay, I
Right.
was in my mid 20s, like I mean late 20s, so I just didn't care. Um, I was effectively broke. I mean, when it hit anyway, so I didn't know the difference. What's that song? We were so poor that we couldn't tell. High Cotton, I think, is the song. And I was like, oh yeah, I know what that's like. I mean, but that but coming out of that, I mean, what initiated that? Sure, it was a lending crisis, as we are told in the Big Short movie, right? And the lending crisis being, just over leveraged and poor loans and high interest rate loans, just all kinds of junk loans out there. That's what we're told that led to this thing. I'd say that's one side of the coin. Okay. There's a whole nother side that getting the details on will spare here, but I assure you that it has a huge weight to it. And I
Yeah.
would say that part of that side is about market corrections.
Mhm.
Okay. And how do we get market corrections? And sometimes you just got to push that first domino and then the rest comes.
Right.
But there's a catalyst, an intentional catalyst for that first push. And then all those other dominoes can be those things that are already hanging out there, that low hanging fruit, so to speak, that was going to get wiped out anyway. And that's what I would say. That's those other dominoes are the ones that's the story, the everything that we're told that happened are all the other dominoes, but we're not aware of that first push.
Right.
Where did that come from? And so the details on that, I'll hold off on this particular show. Just know that I have an opinion on where those are. And so that being said, that is, and of course, that's two sides of that coin. And then where's the truth? Somewhere in the middle. I do believe that it's uncanny that the market has a correction every 15 to 20 years. Okay. And it has manipulations up and down, and there are manipulations simply by trading ETFs, exchange traded funds between banks, very large banks who are exchanging ETFs back and forth, literally to the absolute number of the thousands, simply to suppress the value of a thing. Okay. That is a classic definition of market manipulation. It may not be illegal, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
But who's regulating them? So
Right.
now we got a whole different bag of issues. It's like we have unelected bureaucrats who are put into place by somebody else that we may or may not have elected, who are out there governing all these bodies. And where do their allegiances lie? And so again, we have these factors that are outside of our control. Here's the problem. As the little guy, and I'll identify as the little guy,
Mhm.
okay? We're not the conglomerates, we're not the corporations, we're not the big rocks of the world, if you will.
Yeah.
Uh, so we don't have the clout to sling markets and to manipulate markets. We simply ride the waves. And so I always think of Warren Buffett when I think about how to approach these markets and how to what I mean, it doesn't really matter what happened, just matters that it did, and it matters that it's going to happen again in a different way. Different catalysts, similar outcome.
Yeah.
Okay. But Warren Buffett's first rule of money is what? It's not to lose money.
Yeah.
His second rule of money is don't forget rule number one.
Yeah.
So, how do we operate within rule number one and two for Warren Buffett? Then that is to put ourselves, one, recognize that money loss is absolutely a thing, especially when it comes to our investments and even real estate and so on. But you have to be aware enough, educated enough on the markets to make decisions based on what's happening, or what I call crockpot money. You put your money into something that gives you a guaranteed market correction protection, right?
Yeah.
It
Ab-
gives you an insurance, so to speak, against downside. And now you don't have to be smarter than the market and smarter than the manipulations, smarter than the catalyst domino push that sends the rest of it falling. You don't have to be. You just simply put your money in the right place and then know that you're good to go. And that's where I have learned. That's what I've learned about how to battle. Because I'll be honest, my philosophy is this: we are in a global financial warfare right now. Okay, and this isn't my philosophy. This is in the news. Okay, global
yeah.
financial warfare. Um, we have the BRICS nations, and their goal is to take on the Western financial system, which is the U.S. dollar. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And now the U.S. dollar is effectively any nation that operates on the Federal Reserve System. Okay, which are once colonies of Great Britain, if you will. So you've got Canada and America and France and Australia, like these colonized countries, which ironically all still share the Federal Reserve System, which all report back to the Bank of England and the City of London. The City of London operates very much like DC. And there's a whole different bag of discovery we could get into.
Yeah.
But when you understand that these are all nations that are working in allegiance to each other, but not really each other, but just to their financial purse, and that our Federal Reserve reports back to the Bank of England. My point is, it has been weaponized against other countries. If those countries don't capitulate to what we want for them, when I say we, the government says you do this or else we'll put a sanction on you or a tariff on you or this and that, and then we're told in America, well, that's because it's in the for the greater good. But there's a lot of times that it happens that it's not advertised or propagandized in the news. It's happening out there. And these nations, these BRICS nations, are forming an alliance, a coalition of nations to found their own financial system that they're backing with gold and silver and oil. And they're doing it in direct opposition to the one we operate in.
Yeah.
And the only thing we had left to prop up the American dollar was the oil, right?
Yep.
It was the petrodollar. But even Saudi Arabia is effectively giving us a warning that they're probably going to go join BRICS. And we're not drilling in our own country. Again, there's two sides or three sides to every coin. There's the obvious ones, the other side that we probably don't hear much about, and then the truth somewhere in the middle. I'm just giving you the antithesis to what you're being told on a
Mm.
mass scale here in America. This is the other side of that. And I'm not saying this is absolute. I'm saying this is just the other side. Somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Yeah.
And how does that affect us here at home? These countries are attacking the American fiat dollar. And I look at it and go, this is a fiat dollar. It literally says on there for all debts, public and private. It's not even a real dollar, it's a debt instrument. So even by owning it, you own debt, right? And
Yeah.
because it's so poorly managed, it's devalued 99.9% since its inception. And so there are people who are really good savers, amazing savers, who are crushing their own financial abilities to survive because they're saving and not putting their money into something that can at least grow and or be hedged against hyperinflation.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important that they sit down with a financial professional that understands what the heck's going on so that they can understand how they're affected or will be affected. Now, I want to be very careful to say I am not trying to put fear tactics out there as a means of, you know, acquiring business. But facts are facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything I'm saying, anyone out there can go look this stuff up. You can go dig just a little bit. Okay. And you'll find this information. It exists. And I will tell you where I started pulling back the curtains a little bit for me was I started asking questions. What's this crypto stuff all about? What's this all about? And about 6 years ago or more, I was just curious and I acquired some. And then after I acquired it, it got sued by the SEC. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And now I'm really digging. I'm going, oh my gosh, like it's interesting how America establishes clarity through its legal system because everything has to trace back to a legal precedent. Okay. The Howey test was how securities were determined. And that was, I don't know, 60, 70-year-old law of some sort, I believe. But the Howey test is how securities are determined. So if it doesn't meet the Howey test, then it either is or isn't a security. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there is no Howey test for security, like there is for securities for cryptocurrency. So how do you establish that? You have to have a legal precedent because there is no legal precedent and clarity for crypto in America. And all you got is a bunch of people operating in fear, understandably, that crypto is a wild west of investing,
Mm.
but there are even shifts happening in the crypto sector because of the global financial feud that we're in with these other countries. And crypto is absolutely part in the center of this whole thing, right? And
Yeah.
so it's important to understand that these countries are backing their currencies with gold, silvers, and oil, operating it on a crypto blockchain. And America's over here trying to sue crypto because they're trying to keep it down. No, I disagree. I think they're trying to establish clarity as quickly as possible.
Mm.
But what I also contend is the products that we educate people on have the ability to survive. And I cannot guarantee this, okay? But I have a firm belief that they have the ability to survive whatever comes because they're market based. Okay, the value it may be based on its U.S. currency equivalent, but they are effectively market based assets, and these companies don't care what the market's doing. They just care that there are markets,
Yeah.
and there will always be markets, right? We
Yep.
just are assets that are shielded from market correction, which we are going to experience as we get a potential reevaluation of the US dollar. Okay. And so that just that phrasing alone scares the crap out of people. Okay. So I'm
It
very,
does.
yeah.
It does.
And I'm very careful. Yeah. And I'm very careful about who I share that with, but I also will back it up with this. I have a very positive outlook as to how this all shakes out in the long run. And I will tell you, it'll be potentially tough and or scary on the front end, but there's things that we can do in hedging our bets and in protecting the wealth that we've accumulated. And I look at it like this, Natalie. I'll tell people this. Like I have a vision of myself that I am the captain of a. I've basically been given a life raft, and the size of the life raft is really up to me. But my goal is to go through the waters of these sinking ships and pull as many people in as possible. Okay, that's the vision I have for what I do. And it's to say, hey, and how do I do that? It's to sit down with people just like you and educate and say, here's what's going on. Here's how we can help. Here's what's going on for you specifically. Here's how we can help you specifically. And that is grabbing somebody out of the water and putting them in the life raft with us and grabbing as many as we can. And how big that raft is really up to, the size of our business, right? The number of people that we have join us in the mission,
Yeah.
right? The more many hands make light work, right? But I also look at this thing that we do is like, you know, I am a soldier, right? I wasn't in the military, but I am a soldier.
Yep.
I'm a soldier on the front lines of a financial battle. And our mission is to go out and save financial lives, right?
Yeah.
And so I get fired up about that because I know what's coming, but we can protect people so that they can transition more easily, more intact
Yeah.
to the other side of whatever's coming. We can do that. And that's why I get excited about what we do.
No, I agree. And there's a couple of things there, right? Like we run into people all the time. One of the things that I do a lot with my clients is, I'll roll over lump sums of money. It may come from an old 401k at a job they had. It may be, like my parents had a chunk of money sitting in the bank that they'd saved, their house was paid off. But because of what I do in the education I have, I knew how that wasn't benefiting them. And I was able to help them, move that to places that it is, and creating the opportunity to leave a legacy they didn't think they ever would be able to. And so my point in saying all that is like there's so many things. And yeah, that last few minutes was information I think is really important for people to know. It doesn't mean you're going to get every aspect of what Tim said, but here's the advice I'm going to give you, because I don't have the knowledge on some of those other things that Tim does, but I know who does, and it's Tim. So when I work with a client that is diversified and they have some things in crypto, or they have questions about crypto or something, guess what? I'm pulling my business partner Tim in to help me help that client, because he has an expertise that I don't. I don't need to have every expertise, and I don't need to be able to deep dive, but I know, and Tim, we've had a couple conversations where I've said, okay, don't go too far with me. This is my question. What can you tell me about this? As I'm dipping my toes in to understand segments of the financial world that I don't currently understand. And so that would be my challenge to people is, if you felt like you were like, not, I one, don't panic. Two, don't jump in the deep end. Like, find out who knows stuff. I mean, I say every single week, y'all are welcome to reach out to me, to my guests that are on this show. We are happy to plug in and help give you information, and even provide you with resources where you can do research beyond your conversation with us. Because at the end of the day, our job is to help you get where it is you want to be, not where we want you to be. We want everybody to be financially free, but financial freedom looks different to every individual and every family we sit down with. And so our work is done on the basis of what it is you're looking for, not what it is we're trying to create. And so you can start with small conversations, and you can ask questions. Like I can tell you right now, you could ask Tim any question in the book. You could ask me any question in the book. If we don't know the answer, we
Mhm.
know people who do. And
Right.
that's the whole point, is to start with that first conversation by sitting with a financial professional. If you already have one, go back to them with those questions. And hopefully they have strategic partners as well that they can connect you with to get you more information. And if they don't, or it's a segment they don't handle, then certainly reach out to us. But if you don't have somebody that you've talked to, if you don't have somebody that's helped you understand, here's my picture, how do I fit into all of this? And where's the best place for me to start that makes sense right now? Then reach out to us, because we have those initial conversations. We'll take time to walk you through the small pieces of things to get you moving in the direction to ultimately reach your long-term goals. Um, and there's not a lot of people I know that are as educated, especially in the crypto and the banking side of things, at the same level that you are, Tim. And that's why it was important for me to have you on the show, because I wanted you to be able to put some of that out there, because I don't think there is enough.
There's not. You're right.
Yeah, there's not enough. And what there is seems like it's way down here, like, hey, send me $50, I'll turn it into 5,000 or 50,000 in
Yeah,
48
don't
hours.
do that, people. Don't do that.
Or there's way up here and all the detail. And so there's not a lot of the in between. And I wanted people to know that there are experts like you. And I call you an expert not because you have some crypto license or whatever, but because I call people experts who have done the work, um, and have established their credibility in a lot of areas. And so I know that you have the similar basis that I have, but you've also done a lot of work and you did it for you personally. You didn't do it because, hey, I can go get a bunch of clients if I have this information. Not at all. You did it for you personally. And so you're taking the opportunity to share that in addition to what we educate on, to make sure people know what all their options are. I
Mhm.
tell every single client, my job is to give you options. Your job is to make the decisions. And so the more we can provide, and I feel like that's the same with this podcast, the more that I can provide to generate conversations around finances wherever it hits, that's what I'm looking to do. Is let's talk about real estate, let's talk about crypto, let's talk about whatever it is that people might have an interest in, or more importantly, questions about.
Yeah.
And
And, and
let's get
and the only
information there.
and the other one I would add in there is the physical metals piece. Understanding gold and silver. When I talk to the 65 plus crowd, especially, their general opinion of physical metal, gold, silver, is, oh, it hardly ever moves. I mean, it just, it's never going to move more than the stock market. That is not why you hold it. It is a hedge against what exactly is happening right now,
Yeah.
right? It is a hedge. That's all it is. And you do not throw the bulk of your wealth into those assets. You throw a percentage portion, a smaller percentage portion, as an offset hedge to the what if scenarios. And
Right.
I'm also very big on, you should have it physically in your home. I give information on that. And I will tell you, I do not, any information I offer people when it comes to physical metals and or cryptos or anything outside of my licensing, I don't get paid on.
Yeah.
It's free, but I also don't talk to it with about it with everybody because it's not appropriate for everybody,
Yeah.
right? But when I am asked, I do answer those questions. So because I am a holder of all of that, and I have a very specific portfolio with the intent to not just survive but adapt and thrive, right?
Yeah.
In this new shift that we've got, and that's why I'm willing to talk about those things. But it's not for everybody because a lot of people are operating in fear. I always point this out. People, I asked the question. I used to teach math. Okay, I taught math to middle schoolers once upon a time, and I would start off the very first day. Who hates math? Everybody who hates math? I mean, the whole class hates math,
Yeah.
right? But why? Why do they hate math? And I would say, you know why you hate math? It's because you don't understand it.
Mhm.
So, what's my job as your teacher? I would ask these kids, what's my job as your teacher? To teach us math? No, it is not. It is not to teach you math. It's to get you to not hate it.
Yep.
Because if you can not hate it, then you can learn more about it and then you can become better at it. So my job is to get people to not hate something that they don't understand, but rather open their minds up to something so they can be willing to learn more about it, right?
Yeah.
Because we often have that grudge against the things that we are unfamiliar about and that seem foreign and or threatening or whatever. And so that's all I do. I just approach it from a place of, let's fill that gap of knowledge that you've got. That's it. And I'm happy to do that. And it's but at the end of the day, I mean, I have a very heavy emphasis in my own personal financial household on the things that I educate other people on. And so that's why I think it's very important is you want to do business with somebody who not just believes and or conveys that, but actually applies it to their own life. And that's what sets us apart, right? Is that we're not just out there saying things we don't personally have our money in. We're there. We're in the trenches with the people we're educating, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we're a good example of not just talking the talk, but walking the walk and being willing to show the places that we're doing that. And I mean, you made a good point. Like there's precious metals, there's crypto, there's all these different places. It's not that one thing is going to solve all the problems. It's the idea of having things in different places so you have multiple triggers to pull and knowing when to pull which trigger that helps you through whatever is happening at that given time. And you mentioned earlier, as we kind of wound this down, that we work with clients to help them put money in products that have market downside protection. Um, and what that means is you're not losing your hat, basically, in layman's terms. And so we have gone in a couple different directions and areas and things that I wanted to touch on today, but it doesn't have to be that. It's the idea that there are options, and having the conversation to open the door, um, it is where it all starts, so that we as educators can take the emotion out of it. That's one thing I tell people, and it's part of what's in my bio is I take the emotion. I pride myself in taking the emotion out of financial conversations,
Mhm.
and even will say, I also find ways to make finance fun, because I do think it can be fun. And it's finding out in those individual conversations, and that's why they are all different, is what do they know and where are we starting from? But like you said, helping somebody not hate managing a budget for their household, right? Gives them power to see different things happening, to save money, to, create wealth long term, to leave a legacy. Whatever those goals they have are, is just getting them to take a deep breath and sit down and figure out the simple ways to get started, I think is what breaks down those walls of I hate this, I have resistance to it, I don't want any part of it. Um,
Mhm.
but the best way that I think you can protect yourself in any area of life, but especially when it comes to finance, is by building your knowledge, knowing what's available, knowing what makes sense for yourself and your family, and then working with somebody that can help you move in the direction to make sure you have those things in place. Right.
Yep.
Um, so, Tim, I appreciate your time today. I mean, we could do like probably a 12-month series of deep diving into some of this stuff, but I think you did a great job of laying some things out there that hopefully will start some conversations or raise some questions people didn't know to ask. And at the end of the day, that's what we hope for. So, before we completely wind this down, any last thing you want to share?
Yeah, I would just say this. Look, if any of the topics that we discussed in this show, and a lot of very high level, not really nitty gritty stuff, but if a lot of times what people are going through is they are unfamiliar with something, but they don't know who to talk to get more familiar, you should reach out to Natalie. Okay. And if I'm someone that you feel like you need to connect with, reach out to Natalie. She'll make sure we all get together and
Yeah.
that we can talk personally about any of these things. Okay. And I'll go deeper with you. And if you've got questions for me, ask and I'll answer honestly and earnestly. And so just know that that's why Natalie is doing this, and I love her, and I'm excited that she's out there getting this message out there so that people have an opportunity to figure out who they can go to ask the questions they don't know the answers to, or even where to start because it's so overwhelming. So that's what I would encourage you to do here.
Yeah. And I do want, I'm going to touch on one more thing we didn't dive into super deep, but you know, Tim mentioned it, and in his bio, I mentioned it. He and his family, they sold their home, they went on the road, they're living from an RV. They're in a position where it made sense for their family. Their kids are young enough that that makes sense. Maybe it can't last forever, but the flexibility that you can create in every area of your life. And Tim, I think you're an amazing example of this. And so I wanted to circle back as I was winding it down, is that when you create options for yourself in every area of your life, that is when you create the opportunity to say, I'm living my best life. So just like I said, in having options when it comes to your finances and knowing which triggers to pull when, it's not that hard times aren't going to come. It's about getting through them as best as possible, right?
Mm.
There's going to be bumps in the road, but you and your family are living a life that people only dream of. I actually tagged you in a post over the weekend that somebody said, I'm thinking about doing this RV life thing. Anybody have any advice or know who I can contact? I 100% tagged you in those comments and said, talk to my friend Tim. Not that it's been necessarily the easiest thing in the world, and you guys haven't learned a lot of things along the way, but also there are so many of us sitting back saying, man, how would it
Yeah.
be? So I do want to take just a couple minutes to have you share a little bit more about um what that's like, I guess, for you guys, and
Sure.
the
I,
ability it's given you.
okay. I don't want this to be a sales pitch for selling everything that you have and hitting the road in an RV, but it might come off as that. But I will say this, I had no idea how spiritually liberating it would be to sell our home, but then everything in it, because I made the declaration out loud. I said, we are not keeping any of this crap. I was selling things that I never thought in my life I would sell. Okay. Because that's how attached, emotionally attached we become to our stuff. It's my stuffy stuff, right?
Yeah.
And, but when you're letting these things go, there's a freedom that comes with it because you're like, oh man, I can let go. So what else can I let go of spiritually, emotionally, whatever, because I'm letting go of these things I never thought I could. And so there was just that piece alone before we even hit the road that both my wife and I were just going, wow, that was a hell of a lot easier than we thought it was. And that's usually the one thing that most people think is the hardest part. It's not. Not when you have a mutual conviction to do this thing. Okay. And our reasons for doing it are less financial than they are spiritual and family based and making the most of life and enjoying this precious time on earth that we've got. Because I'll be honest, I have no doubt that I'll be a very wealthy man and I will have generational wealth for my kids. It is not, I know that for a fact it's going to happen based on the choices I've already made. It's kind of like, uh, people who drill for oil, they're out there prospecting. They found the oil, they've set up the rigs. Now all they're doing is waiting for the oil to come to the surface. That's effectively what I've done.
Yeah.
And now I'm just in the patient game. So I'm out there just living my best life with my family, getting close in a very personal way that we could not do even in our own home. And we love the people that we left behind, but they're not left behind. They're just long distance relationships now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it is, it's given my kids a different way to think about life than I could have ever given them, my personally, just being the father in the home, because now they're out there just experiencing and getting their hands on the nature. And when my daughter says, gosh, it feels like I'm in a textbook, like that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Okay. And and how long we do it, I have no clue. We never set out with any ultimate goal other than to just purge it all, hit the road, and see where the wind blows us. But I knew we were going to make a living. We were going to help people while we did it. But the irony is, because of the freedom that we've had, and look, people, we've had some very near death experiences where our whole family was almost wiped out, at least more than once. Okay, so it's not like this is just we're whimsically running through
Yeah.
life here. It's not, it is, there are some wild stories that are going on, and we document it all on a YouTube channel. Um, and so I will say this, the opportunities that have opened up to us because of the choices that we've made, prayerful choices, these opportunities have opened up to us in ways that never would have had we kept our roots, right? And recognizing that is a very powerful thing. And so that's where my gratitude comes from, is that, gosh, it could have been a disaster, I suppose. I don't think it ever would have been because our attitude's always been positive. But I suppose others would look at, oh my gosh, near death this, oh my gosh, that. No, that's all part of living. That's the excitement. And my phrase is like, so what? We go off the edge of a cliff down a mountain because we were living in an RV full time. We'd have a hell of a cool story to tell about how we went out of this world, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
but that's not why we're doing it. It just is a side effect potentially. But no, it's about living is what it is. And so I sit here and go, I don't know how long we're going to do this, but even if money is no object, I don't. I mean, I could still do this, right?
Yeah.
Because there's excitement, there's fun, there's adventure, there's experience in ways that we just never got when we were rooted. So that'll be my answer on that.
I love it. I love it. We love watching your story, all of us. I do especially. Um, I love and adore you and your wife and your beautiful children. I will say this as I wind this down, not only do you have the ability, and you help me to better have the ability to, as I mentioned, give people options to live their best life from a financial perspective. But you are a living, breathing, walking example of how you can take that and apply it to every part of your life. Because the truth is, all those things that we are emotionally attached to, We don't get to take them with us when we go. Even our money, we don't get to take it with us when we go. So you're a perfect example of whatever it is. It may not be RV life for you, but when you have the opportunity to create space to truly live on whatever terms that is for you and your family, take them. And I think for Tim and I both, that's a big part of why we do what we do, is to give people the financial freedom and independence to figure what that out is for them and their family, and truly live. It's not about having the money. It's about what the money can provide for you everywhere else in your life that truly matters. So
that's it.
Tim, thank you again for being with me today. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's listened to us today on Nickels and Dimes podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Kime, and I look forward to continuing to bring you amazing content each week that will educate you, support you, and help you to find financial freedom. I look forward to having you listen again next week. And until then, take care and stay safe.